Hi, I'm Mike, and today I'm gonna show you how to make a molex extension single sleeved with paracord. So what you're gonna need is a pair of wire strippers, a crimping tool if you are using just some wires and not an existing extension, a pair of cutters, some pliers just in case, connectors, some wire. I actually have properly colored wire. You should use at least 20 gauge. This is, I think, 18 gauge, which is just fine for this purpose. A knife, a lighter. This is actually a torch lighter, which I like for this little more. Today I'm doing heat shrinkless sleeving, so this is just to heat the ends of the sleeving. You're gonna need also some masking tape. This is actually a painter's masking tape. It's the best kind I used for this. You're gonna see what I'm gonna use it for, and also the sleeving itself. So let's just clear this mess up a little. And the first thing you wanna do is cut the wires to the exact length, so you don't end up with crooked wire in the end. So you just get all the ends together, like so. You stretch it out and make sure the ends don't come apart in your hand. So you stretch it out, and on the other end cut it to exactly the same length. Get rid of the excess wire, and now we can begin. So the first thing you want to do is strip the ends of the wire. Use proper stripper tool. I used knives before, but you're gonna mess up your hands. It's not gonna look good. It's not gonna be pleasant to work with, so just get a pair of proper wire strippers. So usually the pins come in like this on a piece of metal, so you're gonna break one off. And if you take a look at this, if we cannot get it to focus, actually only this small part right here gets into contact with the wire. So when you're stripping the wire, you need to strip just about 3 millimeters, 3-4 millimeters. If you strip more wire, it's gonna end up inside the connector itself, which is not needed. So just strip it a little bit and you should be fine. So this is actually 18 gauge wire. Put it in the proper hole, strip the end. As you can see, I didn't strip a whole lot of wire here, and as I said, that's just enough. So you take your crimping tool here. Don't cheap out on this. I've seen some really cheap ones that don't use this ratchet action and have not replaceable heads or dies, and it's just crap. They don't work. The crimp looks nasty, doesn't hold. Don't cheap out. This is actually like 20 euros, so it's not a horrible price. What you want to do is first put the pin inside the crimping tool, just so it will hold in place, because it's gonna be really hard to put it in with the wire already inside, because the wire will fall out on you all the time. So just put it in a little, squeeze it a little. If they are good pliers, it will hold the pin in place, so you don't have to worry about it. Shove the wire in the other end. Make sure it is in the right spot. Press it down, and then presto, it's crimped nicely. As you can see here, it's nice strong crimp, which is just fine for you. So I may just skip making all those crimps, but you need to do 8 of those, so just get to the stripping. and this is gonna take a while. In the meantime, I suggest you take a rest, have a cup of coffee while I mess with this. Maybe go grab a smoke if you're a smoker like me, or just wait while I'm finished with this. As I said, it's gonna take a while. Okay, so on one end you have those pins crimped, and on the other you should use the female ones, which have a hole in them. These are just a bullet type kind of thing on the end. So on the other side you strip it again and you put the proper opposing pins on there. So once again, strip just a little bit of the wire. 3-4 millimeters should be fine for you for this application. It depends on what pins are you crimping. If you're not doing molex extension but you're doing some other extension, it may differ, but generally for most of the pins in the computer, 3 to 4 millimeters is just what you need. So once again, also they come on a strip of metal. Break it off. I actually at one time bothered with cutting them off with wire cutters or with scissors, tin snips, anything like that, but it's much easier to just twist it off. And again, this is gonna end up covered with a paracord, so it doesn't matter if there is a little rough edge. So once again, put the opposing pin in the crimping tool, give it a little squeeze. It will hold nicely in place. Put the wire in if it wants to go in. If it doesn't want to go in, try a little more. It will eventually come in. Give it a squeeze, and a presto, your other end is crimped as well. Just repeat it a couple more times and you should be okay. So once again you end up with 4 strong crimps on the other end, and if you've done it properly and didn't mess up, one pin on one end, the other kind on the other, and they should go in nicely, just like so. Now if you're doing this for the first time and you're not sure if you're doing it right, I suggest you take a multimeter. This is just a cheap one. I don't care much about this, it's just for continuity checking. So you put it on ohms. The lowest reading should do you fine, because this actually should not have a very high resistance. If you are reading even 1 ohm, you fucked it up somehow. This should have less than 0.5. So let's check it. We are on 0.3, which is usually the resistance between those probes. So as you can see, 0.3, which is actually good. You may want to check also the other ones, because you don't want to slap something in your computer that is not connected properly. So once again, 0.3, and checking again. .3. And for the last time, 0.3 of an ohm. Which actually, if I show you, if I connect these probes together like so, it also says 0.3. So that means there is no measurable resistance there. Well, no measurable resistance is kind of bullshit, but there is really, it just doesn't matter. So once you've done this properly, you can get to the actual sleeving, which we are going to be using paracord today. We have black, red and blue one here. So I'm going to start with the red one because I think it's going to register best on the camera. So what you want to do, take a piece and measure it out against the wire. So when you're doing heat shrinkless sleeving, you want to end up with, you want to measure the paracord in a way that it will go over this metal part here, but not over the part that actually goes into the connector. So if we take some of the connectors, you can see on one end there are really large holes where the cables go. On the other there are smaller holes, well, where the pins will end up. So it actually will go up to here, and this will be in the larger part, and you want to get the paracord over this first kink on the pin itself, over this large part, so it will hold there when you melt it down. So you want to measure it in such a way. Actually, I measure it from where the pin starts to be round, just to be sure, have a little bit more. So measure it against the wire, stretch it out a little because it's gonna stretch, but don't stretch it too much because you'll end up with too short of a piece. So this should do just fine, and use really sharp cutters for this, because once you use something that's dull, it's gonna mess up the paracord. You're gonna need another piece. It's not worth it. Use proper sharp cutters is the thing I'm trying to say here. So once you've done this, you take your torch here, you melt it at the end and tap it a little down. This is just so it won't unwrap, because if it does that, you messed it. You take out the guts, which really just looks like guts. Throw it away, you don't need that. And now we can actually check if this is long enough. Once again, because when you put it on and have to take it off again, it's just really, you don't want to do that, it takes time. So as we can see, matches on one end, matches on the other, we are just fine. So now what you want to do is we're gonna use the masking tape. You're gonna take just a little bit, actually if it does that, that's enough. You just want to cover this metal piece here so it won't tear the paracord. Use masking tape like this because it doesn't leave glue residue on the pin or on the wire. If you leave glue residue on the pin, actually the wire, you don't care because there's gonna be sleeving over. But if there's a residue of glue from the tape on the pin itself, you're gonna have a bad connection, which is no good. And this masking tape, it doesn't leave nearly any residue, so you're okay. If you use something like electrician's tape or duct tape or anything like that, you're really gonna mess up the connector. It's gonna be hard to clean. It's really small piece with a lot of textured surfaces, so just don't do that. This is actually quite cheap tape. It comes off easily, doesn't leave any mess behind, and it's what I like to use. There can be other tapes that have such properties that can be used for this, but this is what I have laying around, and that's just what I'm using at the moment. So you want to get the paracord on the wire. We are just shoving it over. I always hold, the pin is actually here right now, so I hold it there, shove it on, pull it down on the wire, and now we can see the part with the tape comes out. Now this is gonna be quite harder because when you melt the paracord, it's not gonna stretch there on that spot, and this is where your pliers might come in handy because it's hard to hold with your hand. So you're gonna take this in your pliers and slightly twist the paracord over. Okay, so we're on. In on the one end, in on the other. Take the tape off. It usually comes off easily. If not, just find the end. It's gonna unravel easily. As I said, the glue is not strong, so just do it like that. It's gonna come off. And you have the sleeving over the wire. So now what you want to do is melt the sleeving. So you want to get it over this kink here in this fashion, hold it so it stays there, and now what you're gonna do is you're gonna melt this end, and right after you melt it, you're gonna tap it with your fingers like so. So it's actually, while it's slightly melted, it's not gonna burn you or anything, it's not gonna be that hot. So you just tap it down so it will shrink enough so it will stay there. So we're done here on this end, and as you can see, well, somehow if I pull on that, it's not gonna come down because, as I said, as I've melted it, I tapped it down and it's gonna hold there. Now you stretch it out to the other end. If it's, yeah, right there. Repeat the process. So again, torch it a little, tap it down a little. I may have torched it some more. Okay, that should be enough. And once again, when you pull on it, it's not gonna come apart. Don't worry, this end gets a little messy. Also, where you melt it, it gets a little rough. But if we put the pin against, if we put the connector against the pin, you can see that this will stay inside the connector at all times. So you don't have to worry about it. So now you can start and shoving this in the connector. Now if you're not sure of the proper color combination, actually I think this was black wire. Actually you don't care if you put the correct colored wires in because it's just sleeved with some color. But what you want to check is when you put the connector together, you want to have it in such a way that it goes to the same spot. So once it's connected, it's gonna go to the same spot. So like this, or you know, the pin 1 goes to pin 1, that 2 goes to 2, etc. You don't want to crosswire it, it's gonna make a huge mess. So I use the black cable. I'm just a little fussy about this. Black cables should go somewhere in the middle. The part with the hole inside goes in the smaller connector actually, so you want to put it in like so. And once it clicks in place, you should not be able to pull it out. When you're not able to pull it out, that's good. So you just want to connect it up, put it against it. Now you know where it goes. Put it in. Again, it should not pull out and it should connect up nicely. Like so. And again, you repeat the process with all the other wires. So now let's say we use black paracord. Again, you unravel it. measure it out against the wire. Cut it with sharp scissors or cutters or anything you have. But remember, it has to be sharp. And don't cut it with a knife, you're gonna leave a huge mess. Once again, melt it down a little so it won't fall apart on one end and on the other. Pull out the guts. In some cases the guts may actually stick to the outer coating, to the black part, so just gently remove it so you don't mess up the sleeving itself. But mostly it will come out quite nicely. Once again, before putting it on, recheck if you have the correct length. We do have enough, so put on the tape. Don't put on too much because you just don't need to, and it's gonna be thicker, and when it's thicker it's harder to pull the sleeving over. And once again, put the sleeving over the tape, twist it over, and now just shove the wire inside the sleeving like so. There are actually tools for this, I believe, that so you don't have to use the tape, but I would say how much of this are you making? Like, if you're making your living out of making sleeved cables, it may be worth the investment, but if you're just doing it for yourself, you just don't need it, like I don't. Again, remove the tape. Somehow remove the tape, and if it can't be removed, like in this case I probably pulled it over the pegs that hold it in place, just use a knife and cut it off. Okay, and once again, what you want to do is put it over the kink on the wire, which actually holds it in place, holds the pin in place on the wire. Take your torch, melt the end of the sleeving, tap it down so it will hold in place. Check if it holds. This one is actually a bit loose, so melt it a little again. Much better. Straighten it out. Repeat the process on the other end. Now this is gonna leave some black marks on your hands, or red, or whatever sleeving are you using, but don't worry, it's gonna wash off. It's just melted plastic, so you can rub this off eventually. Once again, check if it holds. When it holds, you're good. And once again, you can shove it inside the connector just until you hear a click, then you know it's inside and it's secured. Do the same thing on the other end, just like so. And you have 2 of the 4 cables prepared. Once again, you can check if it goes to the same hole, but it will. So I'm gonna do this 2 more times with 2 more wires. I may just skip this part of the video because there's not much to show. And for the last one, I'm using this blue sleeving here, just because I have it laying around. And I believe the black, red and blue colors go together quite nicely, but just use whatever you like, it doesn't matter. But beware that different colors of paracord may have different properties as far as the stretching of it goes. So if you make like template for your wires that it should be this long, the paracord for each and every single one, make a template for each color individually, because in some cases some paracords stretch differently and you may end up with a short piece which is no good because you can just throw it out. If you end up with a longer piece, well, you can always shorten it down a little. But when you end up with a piece that's just too short, then you have no other option than throw it out, or leave it for later when you may just need such length. But you know, how often are you going to do this if you're doing this just for yourself? Now this is what you don't want to happen. As pulling the guts out, I actually pulled part of the wire back in, part of the paracord back in with the guts. So what you want to do is, well, not use cutters because that's going to mess it up, but pull it back out with something, and somehow, because this is actually something that didn't happen to me for a while. Okay, that's not good. We actually messed this end up quite a little bit. Well, doesn't matter. We can just check if it will clear the part of the connector where it's not seen, and again at the end it's gonna be melted, so it doesn't matter that much. But you want to be careful when doing this, because why would you do such thing when it will look bad in the end? Actually, the damage is not that bad. And when we melt this down a little, it still looks like you can use it. But check the length again, because we need to melt that end down a little. There should be plenty enough, so we can put it on. So once again, squeeze it over. remove the tape. Mount it on one end, tap it down, melt it a little more, and tap it down a little more, check if it holds, and again melt it a little more. Now it holds nicely. Go to the other end. Repeat the process once again. And again, if it holds, you're done. Shove the last bit inside until it clicks. Make sure you don't crisscross those wires so it will be nice and straight. And presto, you're done. Your own single-sleeved molex extension. I'm sorry to use these white connectors here, but in my country it's tough to get a hold of black ones, so I just have to order them off of eBay, which takes time. I don't have them at the moment, so I just use these white ones, which are available at local stores. Again, paracord, I got it off of eBay. The wires are actually from an old broken PSU I had laying around from a friend or a customer, actually I don't remember. And as you can see, I messed up in the first step when I was cutting the wires to length, and this is what you'll end up with. You're gonna end up with it not lining up nicely, but there's not a huge difference there. But what you have here on one end doesn't line up nicely. Actually, if it's this long, you don't care, because the one end that goes to the PSU wire is gonna be hidden somewhere, so you just straighten it out on the end that's shown and you don't care about it. But if there would be too big a difference, it wouldn't look as nice, and that's just not what you're going for when you're doing such things to your computer. I actually did this color combination with these tools and this actual paracord on my whole case, so I'm quite pleased with it. I actually, in my case, I used the sleeved method, the method with heat shrink sleeving on the end, because, well, I did it to the, actually I sleeved the PSU, not the extensions, so it was slightly different job, but it looks okay as well. I may just show it in another video how to do that, but this is just how you make a molex extension single sleeved with paracord, without any heat shrink, without any extremely expensive tools. As I said, crimping tool goes for around 20 bucks, wire strippers 5, 7, and the cutters again around 7. And actually the lighter is like €2, and the propane that's inside was actually much more expensive than the lighter itself. It was actually like €5 for a can, but the can will last me a lifetime, which this probably won't. So once again, Michael here, and thank you for watching.